when a meta arrives and gets kind of stagnant. That kind of environment is usually when I'm least interested in a game and when I'm most likely to leave. And that's why we tried to make it so that every time you play Slay the Spire, you're always forced to build something different. That's the beauty of roguelike games in general. They kind of force you to adapt to new, changing situations. Marrying that with deck building is, I think, the perfect synergistic combo. They're genres that work really well together and they highlight the best elements of each other. Hi, my name is Anthony Giovannetti. I'm a lifelong nerd, co-founder of Mega Correct Games, and creator of Slay the Spire. I grew up in Woodinville, Washington, nearby to Seattle. Early on as a young kid, I found Magic the Gathering and I really glomped onto that, and it just became my everything for a long time. I had no idea how to play. We just looked at the cool art, saw some text that kind of made sense to us, but we just made our own rules, and I played with friends, and we were kind of close to how the game worked, but not really. It took a while before I actually knew how to play Magic. I took AP Computer Science, and I took it because I knew I was always into games and computers, and I thought if I did want to ever make my own games, I should really learn how to do it. I've heard about this game. I think it's supposed to be like Yahtzee meets Magic. I've played a lot of this game with Jorbs, the Slay the Spire streamer, actually. There's tons of cards with different powers. And you actually play as the island, and you're kicking off the invading colonizers, which is very fun. So, during college, in my later years, I started to manage and run a game store called Ernie's Games. This was a board game, card game store, so I would be teaching people how to play Magic, other board games, and I was just trying and learning every new game that came in. Definitely my general approach to game design is that games are basically a series of interesting or meaningful choices. I believe that quote comes from Sid Meier, and I really take that to heart. Often I will find a game, really dive deep into it, explore it, and then move on. The games that really interest me the most are the games that really focus on giving me constant, interesting decisions. That kind of ties into Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is a roguelike deck building game. What that means is that you are going through a dungeon, the Spire, and you are fighting monsters with a deck of cards that you build and customize every single run. Every time you play the game, it's incredibly different, and the deck you build is going to vary from run to run to run, so that you can never do the same strategy twice. Building on my philosophy that games are best when it's a series of interesting decisions, we tried to nest different layers of decisions into Slay the Spire. So you have your combat, where there's lots of little micro decisions. Then after that, you make a choice on what new card to add to your deck. And then you have the other layer of choices, which is navigating the map, and then the choices you make on the map. And layering these different levels of decisions with each other, I think we come with a really rich experience that's hard to play well. This is Danny, my wife. We met in college. I actually met her in a Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game, and our first interaction was me putting up a knife to her character's back and telling her not to move, and then, it was love at first sight, so.
I do various technical projects, anything from drivers to assisting with porting issues to support.
If there's a tough technical issue, then Danny's the one in charge of it. She's a much better programmer than I am. Recently, iBUYPOWER hooked me up with a custom Element Hybrid Max build. It's in a height Y60 case, powered by an Intel 12900 KS CPU and an EVGA 3090 Ti. We're going to use it as a CI machine. It's very important that that runs fast, that way we can quickly iterate and test our product.
Yeah, we'd be using the computer for building and testing the game, and for that we need a lot of CPU. Basically as much as you can throw at the problem. The faster we can build the game, the faster we can test the game, the faster we can get feedback on our changes.
In college, I met my co-founder of Mega Correct Games, Yano. We became good friends. We were going to a fighting game club at school, and we were playing fighting games with each other and other games.
Talking about ruling the company with an iron fist.
We both found out that we were interested in kind of making games, and we had similar thoughts. So we thought, hey, why not get together and try to make some little amateur games with each other.
We were a little more egotistical back then. We're like, we can do better. So we worked on a few games, a Flash game, an iOS game. They did bad. So, it's always good to be humbled, for sure.
Yeah, for that first game, I did all the programming and Casey did all of the art and everything.
I learned Flash. I made music in Fruit Loops.
Yeah.
Fruit Loops is for professionals, okay? People like the music, I think.
Okay, I'm just gonna go over really quick stuff that got finished from the last sprint.
Okay.
After college, Casey and I both separated and we got separate jobs out in the software industry. We actually learned a lot during this time, best methods and being a software engineer in a business.
This is like 5 years, right? I think I worked at Amazon for 5 years. And then I just decided to quit and make games again. And so Anthony was like, oh, I have this idea for a game. Yeah. Literally, I quit on Friday and I started working on this game on Monday.
At that moment, Make or Create Games was born and we started working on Slay the Spire. Choosing my favorite character is really hard. I think that I like to play the Silent the most because she was the character we kind of made for Magic players, specifically targeting players that like to draw a lot of cards, play a lot of cards, things like that. But the character I have the fondest spot in my heart for design-wise is the Defect. Coming up with the orb system and how you channel orbs and then evoke them is just really unique and interesting. And it kind of just flips on what I think most people were expecting, which was just like a regular mage character. For balancing specific cards, one of the more controversial cards I can think of is a card called Wraith Form. We actually went and made a nerf on it. The Western part of the market didn't mind that change at all, and then the Chinese player base hated that change. I mean, they went hard, and we were like, all right, we will change it back.
What was it, cost an extra mana?
No, it was, so we made it so that it only affected attack damage instead of all kinds of damage.
No, that seems pretty reasonable.
It was a change I wanted, but it's like, okay. If I had to pick between if Slay the Spire was more of a roguelike or more of a card game, that's very difficult. In all of the interviews I've done, I've never been asked that question. I want to say it's more of a card game. I guess the other side of it is I need to prepare to fight the gremlin knob up ahead, and the card choice comes up and you choose the damage card to fight the gremlin knob. Even if they weren't cards, you could be imagining picking items or something, and it's kind of more about that adaptability. It's expressed through cards in Slay the Spire. I do think that it is more of a roguelike than a card game.
Okay. Can I play a card? I'm gonna play Release the Gremlins. Destroy 2 artifacts. I will swing Joriel at Anthony for 3.
I think the thing that I like the most about card games is just the sheer amount of creative expression that players have. So when you're playing Magic, it's not that every Magic game is the same, it's that you can actually play Magic, have a lot of fun, and then you go home and you have a bunch of fun just thinking about what you're gonna do next. What decks are you gonna build? That's what's just the most rich thing about card games. That complexity that you get from deck building. Another game that I really love right now is Mahjong. It's a game that actually I've been getting very into and trying to dig deep, which is not something I usually do with games, but I was fascinated. The randomness actually just adds a lot of excitement and interest to the game. I'm never sure what's gonna happen next.
When the dealers do.
Casey and I both definitely have a philosophy for how randomness should be applied in games. We kind of think of it as a controlled chaos. It's good to have randomness because randomness is a tool that the designer uses to add variety and make things different. But it's also bad when the randomness makes the player feel like their actions didn't matter or that things are unfair. The mechanic that took us the longest time to get just right in Slay the Spire was actually the intent system. Originally, enemies just kind of did their moves and you didn't know what they were gonna do. And what we found is that it felt way too random. If a player didn't know how much block they needed to block for, or like if the enemy was even gonna attack at all, it just made everything feel really discordant. By actually telling the player what to expect, it actually increased how much strategy the player was able to use on their turn. I know that 10 damage is coming, I want to block exactly 5 of it, I think that's the best strat, and then play accordingly. I'm really happy with how the intent system turned out. In a sense, game design is kind of like trying to slay the spire. You're always trying to make a better and better game, but you never quite get there. You're happy with the game that you release, but there's always something wrong with it. When I look back at Slay the Spire, I'm incredibly happy. We've made a great game. But still, when I look at it, even if I spent 10 more years on it, I would still have little problems that could be fixed. That's very similar to a player getting good at Slay the Spire, where there's always improvements you can make. You can always get better. And I think that's really interesting. We've been slowly growing Mega Crit. We'd like to keep going and keep making games. I have no intention of stopping. Game design is kind of what drives me. Actually creating something that's engaging and creative and expressive, it's just the thing that makes me interested and keep going. Currently, we're no longer working on Slay the Spire, we're working on our next project, and I can't tell you too much about that, but I think people that like Slay the Spire are really going to enjoy this next one.